Hello everybody, and welcome to #Active4Life, our quality physical education show, where we get a better understanding of education in movement, education about movement, and education through movement. I'm your host, Norman Mpake, and together we're going to learn about the importance of physical education, but most importantly, we're going to have fun. We will talk about all things physical education and everything in between. And at times we'll do some physical activities with you so that you can be able to practice them on your own or with your classmates. Today, we're going to talk about the common science of physical education. All the content and activities that you get to do in your physical education lessons are characterized by processes, principles, rules, laws, designs, approaches, and/or methods. Because of its interdisciplinary nature, physical education has a tendency of being able to be aligned to all your subjects in the curriculum. Throughout these lessons, we're going to talk and demonstrate how physical education can be aligned to subjects like the life sciences. We'll look at different biological processes that take place in your body, especially during and after physical activity, such as the energy systems. So we'll look at things like the aerobic, anaerobic, and anaerobic electric system. So if you look at this, we talk about the anaerobic electric system, which is around those high intensity, short bursts, those activities, the things that you do in a very short period. The anaerobic lactic system, which is high, medium intensity activities, which are fast and short activities that you're able to do. And finally, the aerobic system, which are the low intensity, long duration activities, your endurance type of activities. So as we go through all these systems, we will in essence be talking about the very basic concepts of anatomy and physiology. Now, for your reference, anatomy and physiology are defined as the following. So anatomy would be the study of the structure and relationship between body parts. And physiology would be around the study of the function of the body parts and the body as a whole. So you'll see there'll be a relationship between anatomy and physiology where we talk about those structures and how they operate and function with each other. We will also make reference to the applied sciences, or better yet, physics, whereby we will discuss the relationship between physical education and mechanics. As you might know, mechanics is the branch of physics that is concerned with the description of movement or motion and how the forces create movement or motion. So these are the kind of things that we will obviously engage on, and some of the things that we're going to discuss is that we're also going to look at things like your joints' range of motion. So how your joints are able to move through the different planes. So as you know, your body at all times moves through at least 3 different planes. What they call them, the frontal plane, the sagittal plane, and the transverse plane. Just to give you a sense of what that is. So the sagittal plane is what divides your body between the left and the right halves. These are imaginary divisional lines. So these are things how you see your body moving forward or backwards. So activities like the front lunges, walking or running up and down stairs. The frontal plane, which divides your body from the front and back. So if you imagine yourself being pressed between 2 glasses, one in front of you and one at the back, it restricts your movements to side movements. So you would be able to do side-to-side shuffles. Or bending sideways. So those movements that you do are called the movements within the frontal planes. Then there's the transverse or the transversal or horizontal plane, which divides your body in top to bottom halves. So around your waistline, you would have that imaginary line going through your body. And this is where movements around the twisting movements, where you twist your body and rotate around your spine. And so those movements are called movements along the horizontal plane. And so these are the kind of things that we'll be able to cover and discuss as we go through all the things that are related to physical education. But of course, because of the social nature of physical education, we were going to talk about how physical education relates to all other life orientation topics, where we start engaging around social development and personal development and health promotion, where you start seeing how physical education is linked to all those developmental aspects of human and social behavior. I'm sure that this gives you a sense of the scope and depth of physical education, and that it's not just an activity-based program that focuses on games, sports, and fitness activities. Although these are essentially the components and the building blocks or the subject matter of physical education, what we intend to emphasize is that physical education is what we call the art and science of human movement. Now, if you look at that definition, physical education is the art and science of human movement. There's an element of artistry in physical education. There's an element of science in the field of physical education. And physical education has limbs that stretch out into the other academic and social subject matters, and creating opportunities for you to be more versatile, efficient, and effective movers. Or better yet, we might as well say physical education creates an opportunity for you to be physically literate individuals, that with your physical literacy and your skills that you acquire through these lessons, you are able to then participate in the different games, in sporting activities, in the different fitness activities, and in your everyday life. What a wonderful subject, isn't it? It's possibly the only subject that allows you to engage your mind and your body at the same time, consistently and continually. As part of today's lesson, we wanted to introduce you to the concept of the language of physical education. And we will do that by introducing you to a concept or a framework called the movement analysis framework, what generally is called the physical education wheel. We'll go into detail around the physical education wheel and make you understand how physical education as a science has its own language, has its own processes, has its own methodologies that you follow in order to make sure that learners are able to achieve what they need to achieve. And so you'll be able to see this, and we'll go through all that after the break. Welcome back. As promised, we are now going to go to talk about what we said is the language of physical education. And the tool that we're going to use is called the movement analysis framework, or the physical education wheel. You will start to notice that the physical education wheel is a very interesting learning and teaching support material or tool that we can use. And it's basically is made up of concepts and content that you are able to cover throughout your curriculum. You will see in the middle of the wheel is what we call the skill themes that are made up of manipulative skills, non-manipulative skills, locomotor skills. And on the outer circle, you start having to deal with the movement concepts. And we'll define and explain to you what the movement concepts are in relation to the skill themes. Now, if you start looking at these things, you'll start realizing I mentioned skill themes, which are then considered within this language as verbs. And the movement concepts would then automatically become the adverbs because they describe the skill themes. So you'll start seeing the interdependency and the relationship between the skill themes and the movement concepts as we go through and explain the movement analysis framework. And then you get to understand when your teacher basically plans your lessons and teaches you certain things, it would be easier for them to actually reference the movement analysis framework to give them ideas on what lessons, what themes to follow, how to assess your activities and your movement skills that you are learning throughout those particular lessons. And therefore, as we go through the wheel, you'll start realizing that skill themes are divided into three components: the locomotor skills, which generally are involving the displacement of your body. So the things that you do that move from point A to point B, these would be things like when you're running, these are classified as locomotor skills as you move your body from one place to another. Remember what we spoke about along that sagittal plane moving forward. Manipulative skills, and those are the things that you do when you are manipulating objects or manipulating different mechanisms or with the environment around you. So the manipulative skills would be anything that you do throwing or catching a ball or batting or any of those things that you are manipulating or using a tool to do a particular skill. You will also find that there's a combination of activities that involve locomotor skills and manipulative skills. And lastly, we're going to look at non-manipulative or non-locomotor skills, and these are the skills that you would do within that space that you are in, where you are not manipulating any objects, where you are not displacing, you are staying within your area. Remember when we spoke about the frontal plane, where you're moving side to side. So the non-local motor or manipulative skill, where you'd be stretching and bending in different directions and rotating and twisting around the horizontal plane, would be those kind of things that we were talking about, the skills under those particular things. Now you start realizing that at any given time, you would be engaging all three skills at any given time, but depends on what your teacher is trying to focus on, what they're assessing, or what skill they're trying to develop. So those skill themes are the themes that we mostly engage in all our activities, and you'll start realizing that within the human movement, the movement analysis framework, the human body, it captures all the movements that you'd find within the activities that you do within physical education. Now, as I was saying, all these skill themes are classified under the locomotor skills, the manipulative skills, and the non-motor or non-locomotor skills. Now, you will see this is not a full list of the fundamental movement skills that you find within that space, but to give you an idea of the locomotor skills, it would be your running, your jumping, hopping, galloping, skipping. Now, all these concepts, you should have at least experienced them throughout your primary school life, and things that you should have been able to understand. But we're covering these so that you understand the link between the language of physical education, the concepts within that particular space. Then we go into the manipulative skills, which include your throwing, your catching, striking, kicking, bouncing, dribbling. And as I said, this is not an exhaustive list. You find all these things are manipulative skills. Whether you're throwing a ball or catching it, whether you're striking with a bat, a racket, or any other instrument or implement, these are called manipulative skills. The non-manipulative and non-locomotor skills, which include balancing, rolling, turning, and twisting. Remember we spoke about these around those particular planes, the horizontal planes, where you're twisting and turning, and stretching around the frontal plane and curling and all those things. These are all non-manipulative, non-locomotor skills that you engage in. And you'll find, as you understand all these different concepts and are able to place them within the space, you then understand how what you're doing can be assessed at different levels, how your activities are aligned to a particular strategy and methodologies of teaching you these particular things. And what we are trying to make sure is that you understand how these words are part of teaching methodologies, are part of teaching you how to learn these particular skills. It's one thing to just do them, but it's also better that you understand what you're doing, and therefore when we explain why you're doing it, you are able to then have that linkage between the theory and the practice and the personal experiences. And we spoke about how in physical education we talk about physical education as education in movement, education about movement, and education through movement. And this is basically the concept about education about movement, where you start understanding those concepts around and about physical education. And so this is part of that process that you start internalizing those kind of theories, so they become part of your language that you're going to engage in. The next component, as we go to the outer circle of the movement analysis framework, is where we find the movement concepts. Now, the movement concepts are divided into three particular areas, and obviously space awareness has two parts, to it, but it's actually considered spatial awareness. And space awareness is about knowing where your body moves, where you need to have an understanding of your surroundings and where you are within those surroundings. And effort, we started speaking about mechanics earlier on, about the efforts, how the body moves, the efforts that you make, the things that you do in order to engage in those physical activities, and we'll explain those in detail when we go through the different components of the effort component. And then relationship, and the relationship is either a relationship with people, relationship with objects, and so you start seeing how relationships, effort, and space again interact and describe how you do the skill themes or the movements that you're going to engage in. So you are able to know, I am moving in a particular direction, I am moving, doing a particular thing, I am moving with or without certain things. And so these movement concepts which describe the skill themes and the fundamental movement skills then interplay with each other. And so let's go into the space where we go into detail around what those three components are. Remember I said within the space awareness, you start having body awareness. So space awareness is about location, where you are placed, where you find yourself, whether it's in a general space or a defined space. When your teacher says you stand within a cone or a demarcated area. Direction, we've spoken about this various times, but whether you're going forward, whether you're going backwards, whether you're going sideways, this is about being aware of what is around you and what your body is doing. So you need to understand what your body is doing and where it's doing what it's doing within that particular space, and you're aware of that particular things. Levels would be around high or low, the different levels that you are doing that activity, whether you're squatting, whether you're standing up straight, whether you're jumping up and down, and the pathways that you're following, whether it's a straight path, whether it's a curved path that you're going to be pursuing within those particular movements. And we've spoken about the different planes that the body is divided in. So those the sagittal plane, which is your left and right, that determines and defines the imaginary line that shows when you're doing movements in a forward motion, so climbing stairs as we mentioned earlier on, or the frontal plane for those side movements, and obviously the horizontal plane around the twisting movements. So you start realizing that these concepts define and give a description to the kind of things that you're doing. And if you start understanding these particular things, you start understanding the language of physical education, and you realize what you're doing is not just activities. You're not just moving around or trying to sweat and get tired, but you need to be able to understand the concepts and how they apply to your everyday life. Your body awareness, which body parts are moving, the shape that your body is going to be in, the actions that you're engaged in. And then obviously quality of effort is around time. And I mean, you should be able to know that you're doing something for a certain period of time. We spoke about the energy systems, about how your anaerobic, alactic energy system is the things that you do under a short duration, those short bursts, and the things that you do, in contrast to your aerobic activities, which are long duration and slower paced activities. So again, you have an understanding of time, and the linkage to the subject about, you will know your own speed, where you can calculate the distance that you've covered and the time it took you to cover the distance. You'll know the speed that you are able to do that. The forces that are applied in that, and we spoke about mechanics, whether it's hard forces, whether you're pushing hard, whether you're catching a ball gently, the mechanics behind that, the forces that are applied and involved in you doing those physical activities, and the flow, whether you're bound or it's free movement, and that's where the flow comes in, the kind of descriptions of the quality of effort involved in the type of activities and movements that you're doing. And of course, the last category is around relationships. It's around whether you're doing the activity alone as an individual, whether you're doing it in pairs or in a group. So when your teacher orientates you and says, find a partner, or you're going to do this activity as a group, it's the relationship that you have and how you occupy the particular spaces, and the relationship that you have with objects. Again, the objects comes back to the manipulative, remember the manipulative skills. So your relationship with objects and how you use those objects and how the amount of force you need to apply in order to do a particular thing. So you could tap something or you could strike something. So those are the relationships, how you start seeing how those concepts interplay are used in describing your kind of movements that you're doing. And so you have to understand that it's not just doing things for the sake of doing things within the physical education space. If you understand the language, the impact it does, and the relationship it does in the way you engage with the content. And obviously you have the last category, which is classified as other. So this other is what you would find in circumstances where we talk about rhythmic movements. Dancing. So rhythmic movements is your relationship and how your body moves in relation to sound. So you're responding to music by moving your body at a particular rhythm, at a tempo and the beat that you're following. And so those are the kind of things that you start realizing the interdisciplinary nature of physical education. That's why we said physical education is the art and science of movement, is that you start seeing how the sciences and the art merge within the physical education space, and you're able to engage in those different things at different levels. And constantly throughout these lessons, we'll always try to remind you of the 3 R's of physical education and skill acquisition, which is around repetition, refinement, and reflection. So what I mean by that is that when your teacher asks you to repeat a particular activity a couple of times, it's not just repeating for the sake of repeating so that you occupy space, but you know the saying that says practice makes perfect. And so we require you, when you learn a new skill or when you are developing a particular skill, to repeat it as often as possible so that it becomes ingrained in your mind. But in that process, to refine that movement. So you just don't repeat for the sake of repeating, and this is where your teacher's role comes in, where they start correcting you and aligning you and advising you. Lift your hands a bit higher, hold the bat a bit this way, and do those particular movements in a particular pattern. And you refine your movements and you repeat your movements and you start doing them correctly over a period of time, and your skills get improved. But the beauty about this whole point is that physical education is physical education in movement, is that you are involved in those repetitions, you are involved in those refinements of movement, and you are able to assess yourself and be able to say, I do feel that I'm doing it better. It does feel that it's getting easier. I don't get as tired as I used to. And you get to reflect on your own development. And this is the beauty about the subject, is that you are able to be part of the process. And as much as you're learning the content, as much as you're learning new skills, you are part of that educational process, and you're able to see the difference, feel the difference, and understand the difference. And this is where the language and the beauty of physical education comes into play, where we're trying to make sure that you understand the beauty and the complexity of the subject area, and that you are able to see how you take all this into your own life and how you engage with other people, and the respecting of space, the respecting of other people's body parts, knowing not to touch people in different places, respecting their own space, respecting how you share and use equipment, is again the social component. Is about how education through movement is that when you're doing these movements, you're able to reflect on, I should not do the following, and the discipline that is entailed in that whole particular process. So this is why we wanted you to just basically understand the language of physical education and how the movement analysis framework is used as a tool by your teacher to be able to teach you the different components of physical education, to teach you the different aspects of physical education, and you are able to even use the framework to reflect for yourself and say, these are the areas I don't seem to be good at, how do I practice them? And we'll go through those particular examples of how you start interpreting the movement analysis framework, where you start interpreting how, when you learn a particular skill, how it relates to the other. So we'll go through that just after this break. Welcome back. Now, for this component, I just wanted to make sure that we give you a practical demonstration how the movement analysis framework can be used in different settings, so that you understand how these movement skills are taught to you in different settings. So let's give an example. So if your teacher says to you, run in a straight line. So we go into whether it's running or hopping. So whether you're running in a straight line, you start seeing the relationship between the direction, the pathways that you're taking. So you're running in a straight line, but your teacher says, please do that fast. So you run in a straight line at a fast pace. Now, you do realize that now we've identified a locomotor skill that you're going to then do in a particular way. But if you're now running in a straight line at a fast pace, and after you've done a few repetitions, the teacher says now, run fast, but through an obstacle course. Now you start realizing that you are now running through an obstacle course. It means now you're starting having relationships with different objects, whether the obstacle course is made up of chairs, desks, or a predefined and made up obstacle course where you start running through cones, where you start running over a bench, where you start going under a particular tunnel. You start realizing how the concepts now start interplaying with the skill theme, and how you are able to expand the amount of content you are going to cover and the amount of things you are able to learn about just one skill theme. So it could be running, it could be hopping in a particular sense, or it could be whatever it is that you're doing within that lesson. It is about learning to understand how these things interplay. And when you get into more complex activities, so this is where the complexity comes in, and where you start realizing by having these fundamental movement skills established at a younger age, by the time you get to high school or later on in life, you would have now built a solid foundation that allows you to participate in various games, various sporting activities, various fitness activities at a larger scale. And it becomes part of your life cycle. You become active for life because now you have all the building blocks to a physically active life. And so those are the kind of examples that I wanted to give you. But I also wanted to explain that a particular skill theme can be explained in one way but mean many things. So let's go to the word dribbling. So if you look at the word dribbling, for example, now if I were to say to you dribbling, some of you are thinking of dribbling a ball in a particular manner, but there are two ways you could be dribbling. So let's just do a bit of a drawing. So remember we said we're going to focus on the word dribbling, right? So when we're dribbling, whether you're dribbling, so let's create two individuals who are going to dribble. So there's one individual who's going to dribble and the other who's going to dribble. Now there could be dribbling of a ball on the ground and dribbling of a ball on the ground, but bouncing the ball. So this one dribbles around particular cones, and this one dribbles by moving in a forward direction, but dribbling the ball with their hands. Now, the skill theme remains the same. You are dribbling, but you are using different parts of the body to dribble. So therefore, the amount of force that you apply, the different types of space that you occupy, how you interact with other learners, the type of muscles that you're using, the different planes that you're occupying as you do the dribbling is an important component to understand that you're already learning a particular skill, but the skill is applied in different formats. And so when you then start expanding on the requirements of different ways to dribble, you start looking at how dribbling can be expanded and how it can be grouped into different settings that allow you to develop the different scopes of dribbling. And so the mechanics involved in that, the kind of energy systems that you use, the relationship that you have with other people as you do these particular things are an important component. And this is why we're saying when referencing the movement analysis framework, you're able to extract so many things out of it. You're able to learn so many things out of it. And you're able to then ask yourself, what else can I do out of this particular skill? And if you play around the concepts describe the different ways you can do the different things. And this is why we said today we were going to look at the language of physical education, so you understand the language of physical education and the science behind physical education. And we hope that this was a fruitful lesson for you and that you're able to appreciate the beauty of physical education. If you have any questions, please don't mind sending us questions to our WhatsApp line, and we'll do our best to respond accordingly. But thank you very much for your attention today, and I hope you've learned a lot about the language of physical education. See you next time.